Welcome to On Our Watch, a podcast about coastal erosion and sustainability in Louisiana. My name is Marian Evans. I'm a filmmaker and a producer of the documentary On Our Watch, a feature-length film that examines Louisiana's coastal land loss crisis and the ways in which it impacts our communities, industries, and culture. The film's director, Jonathan Evans, and I are proud to produce this podcast series that will continue to explore issues facing the Louisiana coast through conversations with local residents, community leaders, and experts. In this episode, we're speaking with Katie Brasted. Katie is the executive director of the Woodlands Conservancy, a nonprofit land trust organized to preserve and restore forested wetlands and other ecologically or historically significant lands in Louisiana. And now, our interview with Katie Brasted. Thank you so much for joining us today, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So, you are not only the executive director for the Woodlands Conservancy, but you're also the founder. So, can you tell me a little bit about how you decided to create this conservancy and what were the steps you had to take to make it a reality?
That could be a very long story. I guess it really started happening when I moved to Lower Coast Algiers, and such a beautiful, sparsely developed area. And then deciding to explore it more, got a horse, and started just exploring the entire peninsula, really. Mm-hmm. I would ride my horse from where I lived to, down through Plaquemines Parish partially. Mm-hmm. And so I would primarily ride on what's public or quasi-public areas and think, this would be so great if it could always be like this and you could connect green space for people to enjoy, particularly when you see wildlife and birds like I'd never seen indigo buntings before. Mm-hmm. And it was just amazing. You could see bald eagles flying as you're just exploring, and discover historical sites that are within this peninsula. So that's sort of how it started. And then one day I was going through one of my favorite little passages and noticed that it was completely cleared and it was being filled with sand. And then it just dawned on me. It seemed like there was a lot of open space, but it wasn't necessarily public land. Much of it is privately owned. So then that's what started the idea of how can we connect greenway corridors and keep the same sense of open space and the rural qualities that make it an exciting place to be in, mm-hmm. To hike or to ride a horse or just take walks. And also, it was meeting some other experts and started talking to them. And it's well, how do we connect green space so that we don't create islands of development, because then species will drop out rapidly. So it just sort of started this long exploration of the history and the environment and hydrology and how do you get people to care. So went to City Planning Commission, where I met Dubravka Gellick, and she said, well, you just go out and meet people and talk to them, and when it comes full circle, it'll happen. I was well, that sounds sort of easy. And, a couple months went by, and I went back and said, so how do you make this happen? And we got into several master plans in the city for recreation and open space, and the UNOP recovery plan. And then I guess it just dawned on me, it's you can be in a plan, but that doesn't really mean it's gonna happen.
Right. Yeah.
So meanwhile, I also started exploring the Plaquemines Parish portion of the peninsula, and I met Benny Roussel, who was the president of Plaquemines Parish at the time. He was also president of the Regional Planning Commission. And he said, go meet with Walter Brooks and tell him I said to come visit him and go tell him about this big vision. about connecting greenway corridors, that regional, the literature says regions should plan together. So I thought, this is great. It's part Orleans, part Plaquemines. It should be simple.
Yeah.
So the Regional Planning Commission did do a master plan that sort of addressed some of the issues and challenges. And then Plaquemines Parish government supported us developing trails on their 650 acres, which is now the Woodlands Preserve. So that's sort of how it started. And the organization was formed in 2001 as an official organization. And then with the support of the Plaquemines Parish government and council, they dedicated the 650 acres for our nonprofit to start developing trails in.
Very nice. That's an amazing story of how you just had the idea and you had to just kind of talk to people and figure it out and get in front of people. Probably took a lot of perseverance.
That's true. That's probably saying it pretty mildly.
Yeah.
But eventually it's like you're in too far.
Yeah. You're like, I guess I'm doing this now.
Right.
So I know that the Woodlands Conservancy is a land trust, correct? Mm-hmm. So for those who may not know, what exactly is a land trust and how does that work?
Well, land trust, it's a legal entity, and it works to conserve land that has great conservation value. It can be forested land, it could be land with historical significance, it could be a family's farm or large agricultural properties. Mm-hmm. And the purpose is to either protect that land through fee title acquisition or to work with a willing landowner who would like to conserve their land. And you utilize a tool called a conservation easement or conservation servitude in Louisiana. That's a legal agreement that would protect the conservation values of that property and has potential tax benefits for the landowner. So the landowner would continue to own the land, but there would be a conservation servitude on it that would protect its conservation values in perpetuity, and those would be monitored by the land trust.
Okay. And as you mentioned, you all officially acquired the Woodlands Preserve property from the Plaquemines Parish government in 2022. So what did that step mean for the future of that land?
Well, that means it is protected in perpetuity and we'll have public access in perpetuity. We were able to do some restoration work on the property prior to acquisition, but there's something about if you don't really own property, it's sort of harder to get people to invest in it. So we would do restoration work, 20, 30, 40, one time 250 acres at a time. But with actual ownership, then we were able to seek more funds to actually do more work on the property for restoration.
Right. And so speaking of restoration, what does restoring a forested wetlands area entail? Like what kinds of efforts are involved in that?
Well, the property, had not been managed. It was just unmanaged property. Yeah. And it had a lot of invasive vegetation.
Okay.
So there was a lot of Chinese tallow, Chinaberry, Chinese privet, Japanese privet, but primarily tallow and Chinaberry on the Woodlands Preserve property. So we worked to remove, basically to kill the non-native vegetation, and then we've been reforesting. So the thing with Chinese tallow is an adult Chinese tallow tree can spread 100,000 seeds a year. So that's why it was really exciting for us to acquire the property and to be able to kill we'll call them the grandmother seed sowers, because those seeds could stay in the ground, probably 5-6 years, maybe longer. And so you might kill the adults one year, but you're going to see a flush of germinants the following year. So it takes repeated treatments in order to really get a better handle on restoring the forest.
Okay. Did you have any like prior knowledge of vegetation and wetlands before doing this, or are you just kind of learning as you go?
Honestly, no. Yeah, I have my master's degree in clinical psychology, and so that was my previous life, so to
Yeah.
speak. And so I guess this is, again, meeting a lot of people.
Yeah. Just kind of
And
jumping in.
right.
Yeah. And so, what are some of the benefits for birds and other wildlife that the Woodlands Conservancy provides?
Well, we've lost over 80% of our forested wetlands to development. Birds depend, particularly birds that are traveling across the Gulf during spring and fall migration. They really depend on those forested sites to stop over, to rest and refuel, and to uh, fuel up before they make that journey back across the Gulf. We have millions of birds migrate during spring and fall, with 2.5 million daily stopping in Louisiana to feed and rest. And with past hurricanes and saltwater intrusion that's damaged a lot of the forested wetlands that were like in Lower Plaquemines Parish, we are really one of the largest forested sites. It's like we're basically the first and last gas station for birds during migration. So that makes it really vital for birds. We've lost 30 billion birds since the 70s. And so that in itself raises the value of saving forested wetlands. We've been doing bird banding research at the property since 2013, and we do bird banding at both the Delacroix property in Orleans Parish, which is 190 acres, and at the Woodlands Preserve property in Plaquemines Parish. So that data has showed us that our properties provide habitat for 263 birds, including 18 species that are of conservation concern for the state of Louisiana. So that data, you have to be federally permitted to run a bird banding station. And so that data then is uploaded into a national database. And we also are in partners with the Louisiana Bird Observatory. So we're able to track migration across the state.
Wow. That's amazing that y'all are able to do that. And what are some of the ways that the public can engage with the Woodlands Conservancy? And what kinds of resources do people have access to?
The Woodlands Preserve site is open to the public daily, dusk to dawn. And we currently have over 26,000 visitors a year. The site includes interpretive information on kiosks and signage throughout the property that educate people about the function and value of forested wetlands, the wildlife they may encounter, the birds that utilize the site, vegetation, and a variety of aspects of what you would see in a forest. The public also participate. We really heavily rely on volunteers during our bird banding. Even though we have a federally permitted bander, it takes manpower to set up nets, to record data, to assist the bander in operation in that station. We also depend a lot on volunteers for tree planting. When we remove the invasive vegetation, we go back in and we plant native trees to enhance the habitat. We've planted now over 35,000 seedlings and trees on our properties. So we definitely rely on volunteers for that. We had 541 volunteers in 2023.
Oh, wow.
So we heavily depend on volunteers. We're doing a lot of planting right now, actually. We got 5,000 seedlings and 150 trees this winter. So we're in the process of planting those now.
Oh, very cool. And how can people get involved with being a volunteer if they want to?
They can go to our website and sign up for our newsletter, and they can reach out to us and email us and say they're interested in volunteer opportunities. They can also send an email to volunteer@woodlandsconservancy.org.
Perfect. And can you also tell us about how the Woodlands Conservancy might offer some protection to the city of New Orleans for storms and things like that?
Our forested wetlands, the 840 acres, they serve as a natural sponge during storm events. The property is capable of absorbing 32 million gallons of water annually. And then it transpires that back into the environment, which keeps our, slowly transpires it back into the environment over time, which keeps our temperatures lower. So that certainly helps us during what seems to be a warming climate. It also serves as a wind barrier. And that was really evident during Katrina and subsequent storms. That even though we had a lot of damage in the area, businesses and homes surrounding our properties seem to have had little damage. I mean, roof damage, but, not at all like what's possible in other areas. So the absorption quality of the forest, like it serves as a natural sponge, so to speak. And what happens is that really offsets the infrastructure drainage needs of the local government by $15 million annually.
Yeah. So that's a huge benefit to the city.
It's a gigantic benefit. And it is probably the largest forested landmass between open water and the city of New Orleans that will, in the next 25 to 30 years.
Yeah.
So even though, if you get in your car, you might be 70 miles from the Gulf. I don't know if you can see our map over here, but as a crow flies, we're really only about 6 miles from Lake Bourne, which is essentially open to the Gulf now.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, I wanted to ask if you had any upcoming goals or plans for the future that you're excited about.
We're excited about continuing to raise awareness of what a land trust does so that people can understand like what a conservation servitude is, how they can protect land that's been in their family for generations, or just if they care about conserving land in their community. The other thing that we're excited about is, I'm not sure if you can see it, but we worked with Wagner and Ball to develop plans for a coastal forest center that would be on the Woodlands Preserve property. With the support of Senator Gary Carter, we have a $1.9 million capital outlay request being considered this upcoming session. And know that with the support of the local government, the community, and the council members, state representatives, businesses, we could make this a reality. The pandemic, in a way, was good for us because our visitors went up 400%. And we've maintained that. We've maintained the level of visitors at 250% above pre-pandemic. So we are getting more and more visitors. This would just help raise the capacity of our organization by giving us not only a place to showcase and store over 17 years of research on restoration and birds, but it would also provide us a place to house all the historical information we've gathered. I mean, the property does have 10 World War II ammunition magazines on it. So we have there's a whole basically pocket of military history. There's plantation history. There's other historical events that occurred within this peninsula that could be showcased in this interpretive center. We have oral histories of men that were stationed on this property during World War II. And we have continued to collect some relics from the past that could be showcased in here.
Cool. So would this be kind of like a museum education center type of thing?
Right. It would be sort of like an interpretive center for some of the history, showcase the environmental history, our restoration projects. and provide an educational venue for interest groups of a variety that we could just increase our outreach efforts.
Yeah, well, very cool. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, Katie. I really appreciate it.
Really appreciate you helping us raise awareness.
Thank you for listening to On Our Watch. We hope you enjoyed our discussion with Katie Brasted. Don't forget to subscribe to On Our Watch on your favorite podcast app to be notified about future episodes. You can also watch a video version of this podcast on YouTube, which you can find a link to in the description. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back with another episode next week. This podcast is made possible through grant funds from the Greater New Orleans Foundation and executive produced by Bruno UK Steiner.